Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Hemp Barons. On today's show, we're fortunate to have a woman who, over the past 25 years, has had as much to do with rewriting hemp legislation as anyone in America. And thanks in a large part to her hard work and dogged persistence, we can now enjoy the benefits of this amazing plant legally. Let's join Joy's conversation with Ah Warner from Hemp Basics.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here on Hemp Barons because unlike many of the awesome companies that are moving into this new emerging hemp economy that we're developing here in the United States, you, like me, have been involved for nearly 30 years in the hemp movement and, in fact, in the hemp industries, starting off with cannabis creation. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with hemp and when you started?
Sure. I'm rounding up on my 25th year in business. And so in 1994, I was pregnant with my daughter. As the story goes, I walked into the Fremont Hemp Company, which was, we were just starting to see hemp stores. And my mind was blown. I came across Jack Herer's book. And, life would just simply never be the same. It was the first time I saw all the possibilities that hemp could bring. And it was also the first time I really looked at, possibly that our government wasn't exactly telling us the truth. So it was truly an eye-opening experience. From there, I just started making all kinds of different products. We had 8 different lines in the very beginning.
And I want to talk about those lines, but I also can't help but say for our listeners who don't know, of course, you and I, and of course, we're very good friends and have done so much work on the front lines together. Oh my God, talk about my sister in the battle with the Washington State Legislature and on a federal level as well. When we talk about Jack Herer, we're talking about the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which for me too, and for most of the movement, was the catalyst. It was the disclosure after searching and scouring records, libraries, the National Archives, Jack Herer, along with Chris Conrad, who is still doing amazing work, and Jack, may he rest in peace, and their team, to really unleash the reality of what the United States history is and our relationship to this plant. And we also discovered, wow, so wait a second, there is a solution here, and the United States government has criminalized the solution. So that turned you on your side there in Seattle. When we say the Fremont Hemp Company, we're talking about the neighborhood of Fremont in the city of Seattle. What were some of the things that you started making back then, sister? What did Cannabis Creations do?
Goodness.
And I love the pictures. I love your booths that you set up at every place you could.
Yeah, I was hand dyeing my own fabric. I was buying that from, I think, American Hemp Mercantile at the time. I was hand dyeing my own fabric. I was hand dyeing my own yarn because that was when, hemp bracelets were, all the rage. I was hand dipping beeswax candles with hemp wicks. I was having a friend of mine, paint beautiful artwork on hemp canvas, and then I would take those and attach them to hemp pillows that I would make. And then I did a little bit of clothing, and then, of course, I did the body care line, and that is actually how I moved forward with, into today's world. That's the connection to the line today.
Such a segue, although 2 things. You also made hemp stationery. I'm enamored by and have so much deep respect for your journey that I studied it. You have archives, and you and I have many times looked through the pages of those books, and I can see those pages in my mind even as we're talking now. And no, you had a line of stationery, greeting cards. You had clothing, sister. You had body care products, and which is a wonderful segue up to the present. And I want to do that, but I can't miss the spot of the Pioneer Award. Can we talk to the listeners about that?
Thank you. I would love to mention that, so it was 1997. It was the sister magazine to High Times, Hemp Times. And it was an award that was given for merit. This was before the days of pay to play, where you gave someone $1,000 and you entered into a contest. It was given to me in 1997, the actual year the last year that they were in business. And so it was my last chance to get the Pioneer Award. And it's given to, your peers in the industry. It was voted on. And I didn't even know most of these people. So it really, really meant a lot to me. And it was given on, outstanding achievement in body care was what the Pioneer Award was for me. It still, to me, means, a lot.
Even as you describe it, and obviously we're weird hemp nerds, but I've goosed all the hairs on my arms are standing on end, knowing what that must have meant to you at the time, sister, when we were so few. I mean, we had to validate each other. The community was so small. The Hemp Industries Association, which formed in 1994, of which I'm proud and privileged to be the president of today, we had only 100 members between 1994 and 2014. 2014. Now we have over 1,700 members. Yeah, you sure were. And so to get that award from our small community and be recognized and validated for, wow, I mean, it's not like your neighbors or your state, even the state of Washington, no state in the 90s was validating this call that we were all hearing, this purpose-driven inspiration that we were getting. And so for you to get that acknowledgement was just wow. And then one more historical piece, although we could go on for the whole half hour just talking about the historical piece of you, but we can't do that because it's too beautiful of a story to tell. And we only have so much time. But can you also talk about the Vogue and the publication or one of the magazines? There was a magazine I saw.
The beautiful.
Please tell us about that.
Yeah, the great thing about Vogue is that it circled back. So back in, I guess it was maybe 98, Vogue came to Seattle to do a piece on, they called it the Underground Glamour. And it was actually, I was featured in Vogue magazine in the hard copy along with Starbucks as an up and coming new company. And Jean Juarez, which is one of our local, So this really dates us because, this is when Starbucks was just beginning to be talked about. And so it was really just a picture and they featured it and they did mention it, but it really, it was a big deal. And then circling back to today about, I guess it was now 2 years ago, a writer from Vogue did an updated piece on my company. And so now on my website, this was then, and now it's now. And so we've been in Vogue actually twice now, in showing the evolution of the company. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow. Oh, just wow. And again, that validation to get in the middle of all of this, just incredible. So then moving forward, you also, there began to be, in 1998, the state of Washington actually legalized medical cannabis. In 1998, that was the year that I moved to Seattle from New York, where I had a hemp store, right? Actually, I had moved from Vermont because by then I was secretary of the Vermont Hemp Council. They'd passed a hemp bill in Vermont in 96, but in 98, medical cannabis passes in Seattle. And it took several years for that industry, which had an unclear regulatory framework. There was no regulator regulating it. And of course, as we know, the law, the governor at the time had stricken certain provisions, which made the law not make a lot of sense. So anyway, it took a long time for medical cannabis to take root, but eventually there started to be dispensaries popping up on the regular streets of Seattle, and they weren't hard to get by. And you created Cannabis-Basics. And so, and can you just tell us what year you started Cannabis-Basics?
So it would actually, when I reopened it, I was shut down for like 3 or 4 years. And then a friend of mine asked me to help him open a medical dispensary. This was about 2011. And so that's when I really started looking to this science of now marijuana. I knew what hemp seed oil was, and I loved it. Still today, it's the foundation of everything that I do at Cannabis-Basics and Hemp Basics.
But this was now the
science of hemp seed oil, correct?
Seed oil,
yes, the true hemp oil. Hemp seed oil.
Yes.
He asked me to help him open a dispensary. So I started looking into the science of now cannabinoids and terpenoids and all that other stuff. And I realized that if I put everything that was beautiful from the marijuana plant into my already award-winning hemp products, that I might have something spectacular. And that's in fact what I did. And then, so when I did that, I was still calling it Cannabis Creations. We didn't have the rebranding for Cannabis Basics until a couple years later. And I'm grateful that we did that. But it really has been just, a crazy learning curve for me. And the products I think they could just get better and better, after 24 years of formulating, hopefully you learn as you go along. But being a part of the medical industry, the medical marijuana dispensary industry was amazing. But what happened for me was then 502 passed, and I was about to lose. I did lose in one full swoop about 125 stores. I was in about 125 medical dispensaries with my Cannabis Basics now fully loaded line, hemp seed oil and marijuana line in the dispensaries. And so when it legalized to a regular, to an adult use market, or what some call recreational market, there was no pathway forward for me because of the way that 502 was written. So, and then that leads us into, a whole nother chapter.
It does. And we're going to talk about, you better, yes. And you better believe we're going to be talking about this massive victory. So people really understand, first of all, the work that you go through when you engage in the process, which is the system under which we live, no matter what we see and what we hear and what we're dealing with right now with the presidential administration that we have. We have the greatest system in the world, and we engage in that process. And when you engage in that process diligently and appropriately and with credibility and tools and information, the leaders, you tell them, and the people lead and the leaders follow, and they have certainly done that with you.
I want to take a minute to thank all of our Hemp Barons listeners and to let you know that you can support the show by subscribing to MJBulls Premium. It's only $4.99 a month, and you gain access to all previous episodes of Hemp Barons, as well as all MJBulls' other podcasts and exclusive content. Go to MJBulls.com and enter promo code BARONS to get your first month free.
To talk to the listeners about something very unique occurred with the United States Patent and Trademark Office around your trademark. For Cannabis Basics. And that's a very important part of the story. And then Hemp Basics, which we're clearly going to get into. But could you give us a summary of the historical achievement around the trademarking of Cannabis Basics?
Sure. I think it was awarded, we had use since 2013 under that brand. And then we trademarked it. You file the application. But we were awarded the first ever federal trademark for a logo that has the leaf, the cannabis leaf, and the word cannabis as part of its makeup, that actually protected a product with cannabis in it. So there had been trademarks before that was for educational services or associations, but not one for an actual product. And so we were able to successfully get that through. Now, they awarded it to us based on our Cannabis Basics hemp line, because they were not going to award it for the stuff that had the THC in it. And I was already doing 2 lines at this point. So we were able to get that through, and it is absolutely historical, and it absolutely opened the door for other cannabis companies to protect their intellectual property. Super exciting stuff.
With the leaf. With the leaf. So
with the leaf and the word cannabis.
And the word cannabis in the body care category, essentially. And so for folks who don't understand and say, oh, no, that can't be right because it's marijuana. No, we're telling you, just make the distinction here that it was based on the line of Cannabis Basics that just had hemp seed oil in it. It has no CBD, no THC, nothing like that. It's a hemp body care line under the name Cannabis Basics. And so in that body care category, for the first time in the history of the United States, it was trademarked, both the words Cannabis Basics and the logo, which include the actual cannabis leaf. And you did that, sister. And you've done a lot of amazing things. And we have to do a whole nother show on some of the trademarks that you have gotten and that you've had to rigorously defend. It's another show, but that to me is amazing.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Exactly. But you've also, and then we're going to get into CHABA, and I promise we'll explain to the listeners what CHABA means in a second. But can you then explain, did you also trademark the Hemp Basics?
Oh, absolutely. The Hemp Basics filing, that has actually been filed. You're correct. So, and I'll just tell the quick story of why it happened. Was unlike many of the CBD companies that are out there, I was using hemp-derived CBD for 6 years now, but I didn't really start to push it nationally. I was only using it here in Washington State. I didn't start to push it nationally until the Farm Bill passed, just this past, December, January. Mm-hmm. And so then I needed a distinction. So now my hemp line has hemp seed oil and hemp-derived CBD, and it is called Hemp Basics. And now my fully loaded line with the THC also in it and all the other cannabinoids from the marijuana plant and terpenoids and all that is cannabis-basics, and that is sold only in the state of Washington. But Hemp Basics is, yes, the sister brand to cannabis-basics, and that is sold nationally. So yes, we have
and in fact internationally, well. and in fact internationally, to the extent that is a lawful pathway, considering the hemp-derived CBD. I mean, it's a global brand.
Absolutely, Hemp Basics can be sold out of the country.
Yeah. So now we're going to dial back to 2012, and when you say I-502 for the listeners, that was the adult use bill that legalized adult use cannabis in the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. And unlike other states, the state of Washington has an initiative process where the people actually get to put forth legislative acts on the ballot if they go through the appropriate process. And in this case, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, headed by this particular initiative by the very brilliant and cannabis heroine and champion, Allison Holcomb, a brilliant attorney who wrote I-502. And so you see the writing on the wall. You're a smart businesswoman. Mm-hmm. You've managed to get your cannabis basics into 125 medical dispensaries. That's a serious number of accounts for a gal creating her topicals. And you realize, wait a second, you guys now you're going to make me go through all this regulatory crazy rigmarole to just do my basic hemp body care when I'm no more dangerous or intoxicating than Burt's Bees.
Right.
I'm not going to go through all. Right. I'm not going to go through all this regulation, and I'm not going to be a sitting duck and make me transform my entire business model. I've been doing this for 25 years, people. I'm not new.
Yeah.
So then now let's explain what you did, what you wrote, and we call it the CHABA law, and CHABA is now legal thanks to these efforts, and I'm going to let you tell the story, but so that folks understand that CHABA is the acronym for Cannabis, Health, and Beauty Aids. It is a defined legal term and defined set of legal products in the state of Washington because of Ah Warner's chutzpah, determination, grit, and dedication to this plant and dedication to civil liberties. Explain to us what happened.
Well, one thing, I did not do it by myself. Carrie Boyder, Senator Jeannie Cole Wells. I definitely had help with Doug Hyatt. Definitely had help with it. But, let's start from why it had to happen. The reason why it had to happen was when Allison wrote that initiative, she wrote that no products less than 0.3% THC could be in the regulated market. And so when you're talking about hemp, that means less than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. But when you're talking about a finished product, that's a different number. And so my products were naturally, organically less than 0.3% THC. That's less than 85 milligrams in a 1 ounce container. And so I knew that even if I wanted to, I was going to be forced to have to load them more than they needed to get into this regulated market, and then I'd be heavily regulated. And so I just thought there's got to be a better way. These should be in grocery stores. These should be in health food stores. This is ridiculous. So I was able to get a meeting with my legislative district senator, Senator Jeannie Cole Wells, who also happened to be the medical marijuana champion here in the state of Washington. I was just lucky enough to have her in my district, and I took my products to her. I showed them to her. I explained the problem. I explained how there was no pathway forward for me for 502, and she was just like, I think we can fix this, legislatively. And so I went to work with Carrie Boyder with the advice of Doug Hyatt, writing some legislation that defined these products. And ultimately what it did was it defined them topicals only, less than 0.3% THC, and non-intoxicating, so nothing to draw them into your bloodstream and no products that would get you high. And what we did was we defined them and we removed them. We effectively removed them out of the Washington State Controlled Substances Act.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but a very important part of that was, and not intended for human ingestion. Wasn't that a piece of the definition as well?
topicals only. I should have made that clear. So topicals only, so not intended for human consumption. Well, not consumption by your mouth, but, our skin is our largest organ. So only topicals. And so we were able to get that. And, we introduced this language. We were able to get bipartisan support. We got it sister bills in both the House and Senate. It was introduced in January. And by July 1st, it had been, it was moving through. We did this huge lobbying effort. I took my son out of high school. We delivered my top 2 sellers to every office in Olympia. We were even stopped by the State Patrol. We were cleared by the State Patrol. We were able to get it in everyone's office. And within 6 months, it was moving forward through committees. But someone smarter than me realized that if they just took our little piece of language and put it into an omnibus tax fixer bill for 502 for the legal marijuana system, that was going to get passed. So literally from 6 months from introduction to enaction, that bill was passed and it was legal. So that enabled me to now sell my products to the mainstream marketplace. So my Chava line is everywhere but the 502 regulated pot shops here in Washington State. That's the short story.
I really need to drive this home, that Ah made it, not just for her company, but for every other topicals company that was using marijuana oil to make a cannabis topical preparation, as long as it's below 0.3 in its finished product, not just but the whole industry. She opened up the whole industry for the state of Washington. She did it for everybody. And they are not allowed to sell their products in the very limited medical and adult use market. They're only allowed to sell to the humongous mainstream market. It was a legislative and hemp revolution and cannabis revolution feat of, I think, of epic proportions. You created this defined category, sister, of products called Chava.
I just want to add one more thing to that.
Please.
I want to add one more thing to that piece is that legislatively, it was the first removal of anything cannabis out of any individual state's Controlled Substances Act. It was removed before hemp was removed out of any state's Controlled Substances Act. The following session, we were able to get hemp removed here. But Chava here in Washington was removed before anything else cannabis in any other state that I know of has been removed from anybody's CSA. It's a profound piece of legislation that almost no one knows about. But more now that we're sharing it on your podcast.
Yes. Well, and you get interviewed by national magazines all the time. This work is tremendous. And we've told the listeners so much here, but there is another piece, and we could go on about all of your efforts, because the consummate volunteer that you are, the consummate, as busy as you are, if you need, if the Normal Women of Washington or some other group, the Hemp Industries Association, is doing some type of an event, you're the one hosting it. You're the one on her computer making the invitations for it. As busy as you are a consummate, dedicated advocate and revolutionary, and one of the MVPs of this entire movement. But I have to share with the listeners, honey, it's so true. And I have to share with the listeners one of the amazing feats that you and I did together, which is, so the state of Washington legalizes adult use cannabis through an initiative of the people, not a legislative act, but through an initiative of the people, which overwhelmingly voted to be accessible to the people. That happens in 2012, but it takes us until March of 2016 to legalize hemp in the state of Washington. It's so counterintuitive. People, once they legalized medical marijuana, and adult use, I should say, because we had medical for so many years, people thought, must be fields of hemp growing. And I had to sit there for 3-4 years and tell people, no, there's not a single legal hemp seed growing. There might have been some hemp seeds growing in Ah Warner's backyard, but there were not any legal hemp seeds. And you had your own research field, and you actually have research data. It was an active civil disobedience, but you've been researching hemp forever.
This is my 6th year of civil disobedience.
Exactly. So, but there was no legal hemp seeds growing. So we had to make that happen, because we didn't use the initiative process. We used the state legislature to do it. So they are the ones that needed to be convinced. And to this day, oh my gosh, you and I personally funded, there was no fund. You and I have funded our entire advocacy to the tune of probably $150,000, minimum in the last 30 years. But this particular one was a pretty expensive endeavor because we created, you and I, industrial hemp educates for 148 members of the Washington State Legislature, which was 147 senators and House of Representatives members, along with the governor. And those industrial hemp educates included the $9.95 DVD, Bringing It Home, hemp seed oil samples, whole hemp seed samples, every kind of fiber, lots of information, some, Dr. Bronner's hemp seed oil soap. Thank God, Dr. Bronner's and Nutiva, they donated the seeds and the soaps. And then we made these beautiful bags with the stickers, Industrial Hemp Educate, Hemp Industries Association. And we had to buy 11 giant plastic tubs from Costco. You remember that, sister? To fill. Oh, yeah. And it took 11 giant tubs from Costco, and we had to buy a cart. And we would take 3 giant tubs in at a time from parking away from the legislature and marching them in. And we've got all these pictures of us in this mountain of 11 tubs filled with these beautiful, uniform, gorgeous industrial hemp educates. And I think you and I probably, and I could care less. I'm just saying that, this is the level of dedication. I think we each spent the whole thing, because I think it was somewhere around $3,600, and all of that time stuffing those bags. Oh my God. And then marching them one office at a time, educating one legislator at a time, methodically crossing them off our list one by one until every single state legislator in the state of Washington and the governor was educated and had actual physical samples to feel and touch and taste and see, and that movie Bringing It Home. And sister, we freaking legalized industrial hemp in the state of Washington. And I just can never thank you enough for being the only one that I could count on to go through that with me. And man, you were there. We did it together, sister. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I thank you because, that was an experience that, first of all, it was just, I think the more that you're involved in the process, the more you realize that you have power. So you leading me to that action really helped me to embrace my power. And it was the model that we used on getting that first hemp legislation passed. It was that model of lobbying that I used when I went to legalize Chaba. So thank you for spearheading
we
that
all
entire
learned
effort.
together.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Goddess. And to the army of mentors that taught me all of these years, thank you to them. It's an incredible tribe of really dedicated people with strong convictions that really understand that this versatile, valuable plant.
I think with hemp, I think the key to our success with those lobbying efforts, if I'm just kind of spinning, is that I think it was really important for us. The whole idea was why we spent so much time putting those together, why it was so important for me when the state police stopped my efforts to get my products in the hands of these decision makers. It is so important that hemp be tangible, that people be able to feel it, see it, taste it. And so I think, that's why those efforts were so successful. We were able to get hemp in the hands of the decision makers.
And to think that after all of this information, to think that we have only told the listeners half of your story. Wow. And so we're going to save that for the next time, Miss Ah.
Okay.
Thank you for everything that you do, everything that you are, your consummate dedication. You are a shining example of what it means to be a United States citizen, number one, and what it means to be a valuable member of this revolution. The human race's relationship with the cannabis plant is undeniable. We have an endocannabinoid system that's now been discovered. It is undeniable. And you are a shining example of how to engage in the planetary healing process and in the healing of the human race. And sister, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so happy to be useful. So thank you for acknowledging my work. I appreciate you.
Just thank you back, sister. And until next time.
Thank you to your listeners.
Indeed, who are drinking it all in and doing their thing. Goodbye.